A terrifying vibration
What's that?
shakes British Midland Flight 92.
There's sort of grinding noises and smells in the cabin.
What is it, the engines?
It's obvious that the crew were pretty rattled by this.
I'm thinking, we've got a serious problem here.
One of the worst crashes in British history has a stunning cause.
It's very difficult to accept that such a basic mistake could be made.
And changes commercial aviation forever.
The learning points from this instance have been game-changing.
Mayday, Mayday.
It's a busy Sunday night at London's Heathrow Airport. The crew of British Midland Flight 92 is completing final takeoff preparations for a short flight to Belfast, Northern Ireland.
Why don't you let them know we're ready to go?
Will do.
Hey, ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard. We're just finishing up our final checks, but we'll have you on your way in just a few minutes.
There are 118 passengers on the evening flight, including British soldier Nigel Baldwin, returning to duty in Northern Ireland.
I was excited, you know, just had an exciting weekend making the final arrangements for our wedding, and I just settled back like everybody else, you know, to what I thought was a comfortable flight.
Midland 92, you're cleared for takeoff.
You want to take it this time?
Absolutely.
Captain Kevin Hunt flew the plane in from Belfast. First Officer David McClelland takes the controls for the return trip.
Thrust set. Here we go.
Their brand new 737-400 has clocked only 521 hours in the air. It's the very latest version of the world's most popular passenger plane.
E1, rotate.
The flight is scheduled to take just 75 minutes.
Midland 92 cleared to flight level 350.
As Flight 92 clears the busy airspace around Heathrow, the controller permits the crew to climb to their cruising altitude, 35,000 feet.
Flight level 350, Midland 92.
Could I have a coffee too, please?
13 minutes into the flight,
What's that?
I just knew there was something not quite right. There's sort of grinding noises and smells in the cabin that I wasn't used to.
Oh.
You smell that?
Is that smoke?
there's a problem with one of the 737's two engines. Captain Hunt takes control, leaving his first officer to work out what's wrong with the plane.
All pilots, the first thing is fly the aeroplane. Make sure the aeroplane is safe. So that's making sure your flying instruments are all in the right place, and if they're not, getting it back into the right place.
What is it, the engines?
It shouldn't be happening. So one, we can hear it. Two, you can physically feel it through. This is like a sort of a humming vibration.
It's a fire, Kevin.
Which one is it?
It's the left. Huh? It's the right one.
I think with the noises and everything, they realized very rapidly it was something to do with one of the engines. It was the root cause of A, the smoke, and B, the vibration and the noise.
The crew tries to stabilize the problem engine by reducing power on that side.
Okay, throttle it back.
Throttle it back.
It'll be all right, man.
And I'm thinking, you know, they've got all these controls in the cockpit, they know what they're doing.
Seems to be running all right now.
The crew seems to have solved the immediate crisis,
But we've still got the smoke.
but want to get back on the ground as fast as possible.
This is Midland 92. We've got an engine fire.
We need to divert to East Midland.
Understood. Cleared for descent to 10,000 feet.
It's an unusual situation. We've all practiced it many, many times in the simulator. We do it every 6 months. But I think to actually do it for real on a dark night with the vibration and all that's going on, it's very demanding.
I felt a sense of relief when the noise and everything stopped. Thinking, oh, it's okay, they've sorted it.
Flight 92 is just 15 minutes from East Midlands Airport. It's closer than returning to Heathrow.
Shutting down now.
The crew springs into action. They shut down the engine so that the fire doesn't spread. In the cabin, Nigel Baldwin is struggling to stay calm.
There was that heightened sense of that little bit of fear there, you know, in the back of your mind, what if? I think there's always that what if when you're flying.
Ladies and gentlemen,
We've had a problem with our right engine. We've shut it down and we'll be diverting to East Midlands Airport.
The stewards and stewardesses came round, taking the trays off us. Seatbelts, please. So we knew that, you know, they were taking precautions. And I'm thinking, we've got a serious problem here.
landing lights.
On.
The pilots will have to make the landing with just one engine.
Flaps 1, please.
To land safely at low speed,
Flaps 1.
the pilots need to set their flaps to increase lift
Power, please.
and call for more power from their one remaining engine.
At some point, the noise started again, and then this time it got worse.
The pilots face a terrifying new danger.
We're losing another engine.
Incredibly, the left engine is now failing. Their plane could soon have no engine power at all.
5 Bella, number 1.
An alarm warns the pilots that fire is consuming the engine. Flight 92 is less than 1,000 feet from the ground. The pilots need to think fast.
Try relighting the other one.
They try to restart the engine they shut down.
It's not. I can't seem to.
It won't start. One engine is dead, the other is in flames.
I remember the flames coming over the top of the engine, and they were just sort of licking around the sides.
I have to stretch the glide.
Captain Hunt pulls up the nose of the plane, hoping to stay in the air long enough to reach the airport. But more and more alarms are filling the cockpit.
Damn it!
The stall warning shakes the captain's controls. A deadly sign that they're about to lose their lift.
There were people screaming, there were people crying. You know, having fear for their lives.
Brace!
Brace!
Prepare for crash landing!
It was like, brace, brace. What do we do? Boom.
been a little wind noise going over, everything would have been completely silent. So it would have been extremely strange sensation.
I recollect my arms being just thrown around until the plane came to a rest. Having no control. That's quite eerie, actually.
British Midland Flight 92 has slammed into an embankment beside the M1 motorway, just half a mile from the airport.
It would have been just 15, 20 seconds more of power before that engine had failed. They'd have got there, so heartbreakingly close.
Emergency crews reach the scene minutes after the crash. But getting to the survivors proves to be a huge challenge. The plane has been ripped apart. While emergency workers struggle to clear debris, Nigel Baldwin does what he can to help a fellow passenger.
Come on. Got to get you out.
I had to bring her onto my chest and pull myself backwards along the cables and girders that were left because of the plane was... The only way I've described it as a chicken carcass after a Sunday roast, weak and feeble.
The shattered fuselage has come to rest on a steep embankment where it's in danger of sliding down and killing more people. Experts from the Air Accidents Investigation Branch advise rescuers on the best way to secure it.
We took a pragmatic view and roped the tail to trees so that it wasn't going to fall over.
A dense tangle of broken seats is making it difficult to reach the survivors. Rescuers are astonished that no one driving on the busy M1 motorway has been hurt.
In fact, there were no victims on the ground, which we thought was absolutely remarkable.
87 of the 126 people on board are alive, but many are injured, including Captain Hunt, who has a broken spine.
Because of the steepness of the embankment that the aircraft was on, the emergency services were forming effectively a human chain, so as victims were pulled out from the wreckage, those stretchers were handed from one person to the next until they could be put into ambulances.
With the rescue complete, Britain's Air Accidents Investigation Branch can finally get to work. Rob Carter is one of the first investigators at the scene.
We arrived at the crash scene very late into the evening. All the emergency services were there, ambulance, fire, police. Some press people were just beginning to arrive. Tremendous amount of activity, and it took a minute to really assess just what was going on. It was dramatic. Walked into the nose section, and I'm looking up at the ceiling, up at the roof of the aircraft. There are no overhead bins. That's really odd. And I realized, where is the aircraft floor?
The crash has forced the closure of the M1 motorway, a major traffic artery. Investigators need to work as quickly as they can. Their first priority is getting their hands on the plane's black boxes, or flight recorders.
Recovering the flight recorders, of course, is a very major priority at the beginning of an investigation, because they have to be sent away, they have to be downloaded and interpreted.
Meanwhile, Rob Carter learns what he can from the layout of the crash site.
I wanted to understand where all the bits of the structure of the aircraft were. And that led me up onto the embankment where the aircraft had had its first impact.
Looks like the landing gear hit here.
The plane has left deep gouges in the ground along its path. They give Carter his first hints about how the crash unfolded.
The marks showed almost in a textbook form the attitude the aircraft was in when it hit the ground. The direction it was going, the position it was in. It was really helpful for developing what happened.
Got close enough to see the runway lights.
It must have been very devastating for the crew and for everybody on board.
It's becoming clear the plane didn't have the speed it needed to reach the runway. The question is why?
I think all of the team, their first impression was that this airplane seems to have had some problem with engine power.
The aircraft just, didn't have the power to make it to the runway.
Damn it!
The pilots are too badly hurt to be interviewed. For now, investigators learn what they can from the controller on duty the night of the crash.
They said they had an engine fire.
The controller explains that the crew reported a problem about 20 minutes before the crash.
This is Midland 92. We've got an engine fire. We need to divert to East Midlands.
Understood. Cleared for descent to 10,000 feet.
The controller's story raises a question. The 737 aircraft has two powerful engines. How could a fire in one of them cause a plane to crash? The fatal crash of a British airliner near a busy motorway has frightened air travelers across the United Kingdom. AAIB engineer Chris Pollard heads up the investigation's engine team.
If he had had one good engine, there would have been no issue about landing. So that was the initial mystery to solve.
Damage to the engine fan blades soon confirms the investigators' hunch. The plane didn't have one good engine. Neither of them was working at the moment of impact.
Both engines showed pretty low speed rotation at the impact. So it was a question of sorting out why they were both there.
Dual engine failure is incredibly rare. When it does happen, investigators know there's one thing they need to check immediately.
Okay, let's see if we can rule out the obvious.
Was there water in the fuel? Because, of course, the fuel is the one thing that is common to both engines.
If there was water contaminating the fuel, it should be easy to detect.
Right.
Water is heavier than jet fuel and will sink to form a visible layer.
So, no water at all. Okay, so we can strike out the fuel.
On Flight 92, however, fuel was not the problem. There's no sign of fuel contamination, and the tanks weren't empty.
Flight level 350, Midland 92.
There's another possibility. Birds are a huge hazard for aviation. When they get ingested by jet engines, they can do enormous damage. If the engines of Flight 92 were disabled by birds, traces of blood and tissue will glow under ultraviolet light.
At this point, we had no proof at all.
Lights up.
There was nothing that really would demonstrate that a bird strike was the cause of this particular group of distorted blades.
Flight 92 crashed less than a mile from the town of Kegworth. Many witnesses saw the plane coming down with an engine on fire. But some add a second intriguing detail about the crash.
Well, it went past like a cement mixer. It was awful. It was a noise that one doesn't associate with an aeroplane unless it's in real trouble.
The witnesses heard a lot of odd noises coming from this aircraft. Some of them described it as being like a grinding metallic noise.
Some witnesses saw aircraft debris fall onto farmland more than 2 miles from the crash site.
Police provided a search team to do a fingertip search across fields around there, and they came back with a lot of fragments.
These are likely the first pieces to have fallen from the plane, making them critical clues to the origins of the disaster. Pollard needs to figure out why these pieces broke off.
Better get to it.
The answer will tell him what caused the engine trouble that triggered the diversion to East Midlands. While Pollard works on the engines, the rest of the team turns to the best lead they have, the plane's voice and flight data recorders.
Brilliant. Thank you. Let's hope this gives us what we need.
I think it took several days to actually download and make sure that what we got was the correct data and we were interpreting it correctly.
The flight data recorder captures more than 60 parameters, including engine performance.
So the right engine stops here, and the left gives out more than 15 minutes later here. Whatever the two problems were, they didn't happen at the same time. Let's hear it. That's an engine vibration. Can't be anything else.
Investigators hope the cockpit voice recorder will provide more insight into what went wrong.
Let's see what you do about that.
The cockpit voice recorder is listening to what's going on in the cockpit and what the crew are saying to each other and the sounds associated with the flight. And of course, in this case, what the two crews said to each other was absolutely crucial.
Whoa. Well, that's a bit of a surprise.
What is it, the engines?
We could hear the banging of this and the shaking, and it's obvious that the crew were pretty rattled by this as well.
Which one is it?
It's the left.
Oh, it's the right one.
Did he say the right one?
It was a little bit of a mystery that the voice recorder showed them apparently opting for the right engine as being where the problem was.
I can't see anything wrong with the right engine at this point.
We were suspecting that the right engine had been shut down, but it was the left engine that had the problem. It was vital that we got the crew's version of events.
Well, I'll tell you whatever I can. It's just as important to me to understand what happened as it is for you.
The captain is still recovering from his injuries, so investigators rely on the first officer to tell them everything he remembers about the crisis.
This is a nearly new aircraft. What's gone wrong? We don't understand it. Tell us what happened.
It started with the vibrations in the right engine. The vibrations were really fierce. Captain Hunt suggested that we throttle back.
Throttle it back.
Do you mind if I just get a glass of water? Obviously, I did as Captain Hunt suggested. We throttled back the right engine and the vibration stopped.
Seems to be running all right now.
The vibration and the noise went away, so it would have indicated to them we've done the right thing.
Investigators are forced to consider an unusual theory.
This could be two unrelated engine failures. Fire on the left side, and an entirely different one on the right side.
Chris Pollard scrutinizes engine debris recovered from farmland near Kegworth. Every fragment is a potential clue about what happened to British Midland Flight 92.
Some bits were extremely small. It is actually a tribute to the quality of the search that we got as much as we did.
One fragment stands out.
Gotcha.
It shows clear signs of metal fatigue. Because of where it was found, Pollard believes it was almost certainly the first thing to break on the 737.
If we assumed that the fatigue failure was the first failure, that would have lost about 4 inches off the end of one of the blades.
The finding could explain how the engine failure began. Even one broken fan blade can disturb the flow of air through an engine, causing it to surge, a process similar to a car backfiring.
What is it, the engines?
The engine tries to find a new balance, and to do that, it rattles around.
It'll be all right, man.
It would have been a lot of physical vibration. The passengers reported that it was like the sound of, in a tumble dryer, of rocks and stuff being thrown around. It would have really been quite violent.
No two fan blades are ever exactly the same. Pollard hopes a metallurgical examination will tell him which engine the weakened blade came from.
Although the blades were all nominally of exactly the same alloy, there were, if you started to look in the sort of parts per million analysis of these things, there were slight differences between each blade.
Pollard soon has an answer.
Blade 17, left engine.
The blade that broke first and caused the vibration came from the left engine. Investigators now face a troubling question. Why did the pilots shut down the right engine if the vibrations were in the left?
A crew this experienced? It's hard to believe they would shut down the wrong engine.
Pilots have an array of instruments that tell them about the operation of their engines, including one that measures vibration.
I think there was a lot of skepticism from the operations inspectors, the pilots on the team, because here we have a very experienced, well-qualified crew, a captain in particular.
Which one is it?
It's the left.
Huh? It's the right one.
And it's very, very difficult to accept that such a basic mistake could be made.
Okay, so let's see if the left and right got swapped somehow.
Investigators wonder if a faulty engine gauge gave the pilots the wrong information about which engine was breaking down.
It had happened in the past once that the engine instruments had been cross-connected. So the left instrument was telling you what the right engine was doing and vice versa.
Okay, so it looks idiot-proof to me. There's no way the left and right got switched.
The connectors that connect onto the back of the instruments were effectively what's known as clocked, which means that you can't fit left to right, right to left.
The tests are conclusive. The engine gauges work perfectly, and it's not possible to connect them to the wrong engine. There's another possibility. The vibration may have been so severe that it became impossible to read the shuddering gauges.
This could be something.
An American 737 captain had had one of these onset of serious vibration, and he said the whole instrument panel just vanished into a blur. He couldn't see a thing.
It was a huge concern because their engines are shut down around the world, I'm sure many times a day. Very, very seldom is it the incorrect engine. So it was a standout moment, really.
Captain Hunt is finally well enough to talk to investigators.
There is no doubt in my mind the problem was with the right engine.
He insists there was a problem in the right engine, and he has proof. The air conditioning system on jetliners is fed by air from the engines. And after more than 13,000 hours flying jetliners, Captain Hunt has learned the complex relationship between his engines and the systems they feed.
Shut it down.
On the previous plane he flew, the right engine provided nearly all the air in the cockpit.
When I smelled the smoke, I knew the problem was with the right engine.
As they were smelling it in the cockpit, they thought that this must be an indication that it was the right engine that was having a fairly major mechanical problem.
On the 400, the aircon draws from both engines.
It's a tragic assumption. Investigators learn that on this newer version of the 737, both engines supply air to the cockpit.
We're not consciously aware of how we make the decisions. So if we get slightly the wrong mental picture, or situation awareness as we call it, we will make a decision based on that slightly incorrect awareness, which might give us the wrong outcome.
The captain has another good reason to believe it was the right engine. The first officer tells him so.
It's the left.
Huh?
It's the right one.
Throttle it back.
I just stumbled over my words, that's all.
I don't think we'll ever know why he changed his mind mid-diagnosis.
We're talking to people who've just been through the most traumatic thing, you know, and asking them to explain their thought processes.
Right, here are gauges.
The layout of the cockpit instruments may provide a partial explanation.
Right engine. Right. Oh. See, I can see how you'd mess this up.
The gauges that measure vibration sit on the right side of the panel. Under stress, the first officer may have thought they correspond to the right engine.
The problem is definitely in the right engine.
But the theory doesn't stand up. If the crew shut down the good right engine, why did the vibration suddenly stop in the faulty left engine?
They reduce the power on the right engine, but somehow the left engine settles down.
An important piece is missing from this puzzle. Investigators analyze everything the pilots did during Flight 92. When the crisis hits, they reduce power to the right engine.
Seems to be running all right now.
The engine problems seem to stop.
I'm in no doubt that that was by far the most dominant cue for them that they had done the right thing and the problem lay in the right engine.
The data shows the first officer made a crucial adjustment just seconds before the vibration stopped.
That's it, of course. He had to disconnect the autothrottle.
Throttle it back.
To reduce power on the right-hand side, the pilot must first switch off the autothrottle.
Autothrottle off.
The part of the autopilot that regulates engine power. Switching to manual has an unforeseen side effect. It reduces power to the left engine, leading to a temporary but dramatic improvement in performance.
It was damaged, but it was reasonably happy operating at a low power setting, which is all it needed because they were constantly descending towards the airfield.
It was probably the killer blow, because what that meant was that they felt that what they had done, which was to close the right-hand engine down, was the correct thing to have done.
All right. Everything from after the smoke and vibrations start, please.
The sounds on Flight 92's voice recorder reveal the pilots had another challenge.
Let's see what we've got here. Vibrations, smoke,
As they start to assess the escalating crisis, they're interrupted by a radio call.
Midland 92, you're cleared for descent to flight level 40.
Descending to flight level 40, Midland 92.
You're almost willing them to say, no, forget talking to air traffic control. Keep analysing the problem, you'll get there.
The hairs on the back of my neck still stand then, because I just wish the next time I listen to it, it'll be different.
Flight 92 came tragically close to landing. With its right engine shut down, the plane flew for nearly 17 minutes on just the damaged left engine.
Power, please.
What triggered the final deadly failure and made the engine explode in flames? Inside the left engine, Pollard has found deep scratches cut into the soft acoustic lining that muffles engine noise. The marks suggest a theory about the failure.
Quite clearly, there was relatively little damage done at the first failure. We thought one of the blades, if it flew forwards, it could embed itself in the soft material, which is the acoustic lining of the intake.
Pollard suspects that when the first blade snapped, the broken tip became embedded in the acoustic lining.
Power, please.
When the crew increased power, the extra vibration shook the fragment loose into the engine, setting off a cascade of destruction.
We're losing another engine.
It knocked a bit off another blade. Now we had two bits going round the engine, and it built up to a sort of calamitous failure of lots and lots of blades.
There was another opportunity for the crew to identify their mistake. Passengers who sensed the error.
I knew something was wrong when I heard that announcement.
Ladies and gentlemen,
We've had a problem with our right engine. We've shut it down and we'll be diverting to East Midlands Airport.
I partly wanted to say, excuse me, there's a problem with the left-hand side. Can you not see that when you're saying it's the right-hand side? But a little bit we was going, don't interfere. They know what they're doing.
The crew tries to restart the engine they mistakenly shut down, but they're too close to the ground.
At the time that the engine failed for good, there was insufficient time to get the other engine started, because startup of a fan engine takes an appreciable time.
With no engine power, the crash is inevitable. In their final report, investigators call for improved vibration gauges that are easier for pilots to read. They also highlight the importance of good communication between the cockpit and the cabin.
I think for the travelling public, if you see something odd on the wings or whatever when you're sitting as a passenger, mention it to somebody, and that message will now get through to the pilots.
The cause of one of Britain's worst air disasters is now clear. But investigators think this crash still has more to teach them about saving lives.
This was right on the edge of what was a survivable accident, and that was what made it so important that we dig into the issues in this to see how that figure could be improved.
79 people survived the crash of British Midland Flight 92, but many of the survivors were badly hurt. Rob Carter intends to find out why.
In the old days of aviation, there was an expectation that if somebody survived an accident, it was just plain luck. Starting in the 60s and 70s, the idea grows in that actually a lot of these people's lives can be saved, and that's affected a lot of design within an aircraft.
When pilots lose control at high altitude, it's nearly always fatal. But Flight 92 was in a controlled descent until the final seconds. It should not have been so deadly.
The thought was, if there's any part of the aircraft that survives, actually, most of the occupants should have a decent chance as well.
Medical records provide details on the injuries of every passenger.
It was a very emotional time. This is a very human business. We wouldn't be in it otherwise.
Carter matches the fate of every passenger to the location of their seat on the plane.
In the front section of the aircraft, it was the worst, and then followed by the area just behind the wing. The better areas were in the tail section.
Carter wonders why some locations were so much more dangerous than others. The broken seats from the cabin provide an intriguing lead.
There were a number of engineering features in these seats which we hadn't really seen before, and which were pretty important.
Some of the worst injuries came from passengers being struck by loose seats. The finding raises a question. Aircraft seats are designed to absorb the powerful G-forces of a plane crash to help protect passengers. So why didn't they? Test data from the US Federal Aviation Administration confirms that the seats can handle up to 16 Gs, more than enough to stand up to the crash near Kegworth.
If anything, the seats are better than they should be.
Something clearly went wrong. Rob Carter scrutinizes the crumpled seats from Flight 92, searching for clues about why they came free. It's a crucial step for keeping passengers safer in future crashes. A computer simulation helps him understand exactly how impact forces affected the cabin.
No wonder the seats came loose.
The simulation shows why some areas were so badly torn apart. It wasn't the seats that failed. It was the floor.
The fact that the floor had collapsed made it for a very big problem. It meant that the seats were almost sandwiched up against each other, and that made it very difficult for the rescuers.
During a crash, the seats are designed to stay securely bolted through the floor to the strong metal frame of the airplane.
There is no particular point in having seats which are much stronger than the floors they're sitting on.
Even in areas where the floor stayed intact, many passengers were badly hurt when they struck their head on the seat in front of them.
Brace!
Brace!
The passengers on Flight 92 were warned by the captain to brace. It should have provided some protection from injuries like these.
Before this accident, it seemed to me that a lot of airlines would have a lot of different recommendations for brace positions, and I don't think they were particularly scientifically founded.
Carter analyzes the brace position recommended by airlines in the UK.
We were able to work out just what happened to people's bodies in the impact. And we were able to tie that up with what the medical people were able to tell us about the injuries they'd suffered, both the people who'd survived and the people who'd died.
The results are dramatic, revealing serious problems with the recommended brace position.
Very often, with head injuries and neck injuries particularly, it would be either from people's heads lolling around, being uncontrolled in an impact, because our neck muscles are not strong enough to stop that, and also from cannoning into the seat back in front.
The findings contribute to important improvements. Experts now recommend that passengers bend forward as far as possible with their head down and their arms either wrapped around their legs or braced on the seat in front of them.
It all happens so quickly, none of us can control it consciously. It's a matter of trying to put ourselves in a position where the effects of the impact are going to be as small as possible.
Since the crash of Flight 92, aircraft design has also evolved. Floors are now much stronger. Overhead bins have sturdier mounts and are much less likely to collapse.
What was very heartening was that the attitude from the regulators, and particularly from the aircraft manufacturers, was that it really mattered that the overhead bins had come down, that that was something that was simply not tolerable, and the manufacturer took huge efforts to make sure that that sort of thing would not happen again.
After the investigation, the airline dismisses both pilots.
I hold no malice towards them whatsoever. There's always going to be victims of other people's mistakes, and I think the best thing we can do is learn from those mistakes.
It's very satisfying that this accident has led to real changes and real improvements in crashworthiness. It is desperately sad that it came at the cost of many people dying, of many people being injured, of many people's lives being forever altered. That's tragic. I'm just glad that something did come out of it.
The learning points from this incident have been game-changing for the aviation industry. And now flying, fortunately, is extremely safe. The dangerous part is getting to the airport.